What's up, y'all? It's me, the Drizzleboy. Today we're gonna be talking about Supergirl and the future of DC Comics. If you don't know me, you might recognize me from the infamous James Gunn cameo porn. I want to say this: I want to be as unbiased as possible, because after that tweet, he actually followed me and then unfollowed me later because I'm insane and a weirdo. So just to get that clear out the mark, there's been some rumors that, he tried to solicit me as a gay prostitute. That was just fabricated. That was parody. But we're going to dive into what actually has happened with Supergirl, the promotion of Supergirl, and what's really going wrong within the DC Comics fandom. I am a huge DC Comics fan. I probably watched every single animated DC Comics project out there. I like to read the comics, but I can't say that I'm an avid comic reader. I like to pick up single issues, and then, also like series I really like the Injustice series. I pretty much bought every single book and read that. The Injustice series is definitely one of my favorite comic books because it really just kind of ties in all these different characters that don't really get a lot of spotlight. I really am a huge Raven fan, and to see Raven kind of take up this different role within it compared to the Teen Titans TV show, it was really quite interesting. And then another thing I like to do is just watch YouTube videos on the history of comic books, because I think it's just so fascinating how we led up to this point. Now, Superman, I wanted to see it in theaters, but I didn't get the opportunity. I was supposed to go with my husband and his family, but unfortunately I was so sick I couldn't attend, and life just spits in your face like that. Like, even though I got unfollowed by James Gunn, I really wanted to see the movie in theaters. I didn't get that opportunity, but maybe I'll get to see Supergirl in theaters. But there has been a big storm towards Supergirl in the movie. A lot of backlash coming out from the DC Comics fandom, a lot of headlines coming out that is going to underperform compared to past comic book movies, and especially in comparison to the domestic opening of Superman. Superman had a great domestic opening in the US, but really failed to capture international markets, including a very piss poor, performance in China. When it comes to movies, I don't really care if it performs if I like the movie, but also there is a sense that, if you want to see your favorite characters continue to play these roles, you're going to have to actually make money with the projects that you're creating. And this is where it really just kind of creates this huge tension between the DC comic fandom and DC Comics, is because, people want to see DC Comics in theaters. Like, even the last era of the Zack Snyder era, people went to see those movies. Like, so many of those movies are huge box office hits. So you have to have a box office number that matches, the budget. And the budget of this movie was $175 million according to Deadline, and $200 million according to Forbes. What people don't realize about movie budgets is that you don't break even with that $200 million, $175 million. You actually have to make a lot more than that, because theaters actually take a cut to show the movie. It ranges between 30 to 70%. The 70% is leaning towards the international markets, as they tend to take more money in exchange to show the movie. And that budget is only for the production costs and does not include marketing. So, for a movie like this, it needs to at least make $400 million. That's like the lowest amount to really even considered a break-even point. And even that number is relative, because there's a lot of different ways that studios try to make money outside of just the box office. And in fact, that number might need to even be bigger depending on how much is spent on the marketing and whether or not that 175 million is the factual budget. I'm not going to say anything unless paperwork comes out from DC Comics, but these are what the people are reporting from Deadline and Forbes. So for example, Superman made $618.7 million. I do believe that Superman was a profitable project, but to what margin? Because if you look at past superhero movies, that is actually relatively on the lower side. Obviously, there's ways that movies like this actually make money outside of the box office. There's the direct-to-consumer market. There's like licensing to things like Netflix. There's a lot of different ways outside of that initial budget where they start making money. And if you look at Superman, they actually took it out of theaters early and put it on the auxiliary market so that they could actually start recouping some of that money faster. So it would be a lie to say that Superman did not make money. Superman was a profitable project. It's just to what extent in comparison to the other superhero projects that have come out in the same genre. And if you go back in time a little bit, without even accounting accounting for inflation, the Suicide Squad made $749.2 million worldwide with a budget of $175 million. So a same budget as Supergirl ended up making $749 million. So you actually have to think about that when it comes to comparing movies, that I consider the Suicide Squad a female-led movie just as much, because Harley Quinn was like the star of that movie. I saw that movie 3 times in theaters, and people can talk about how bad that movie, how bad the plot is. I don't care, because at the end of the day, that felt like one of the most comic booky movies ever. Like that scene where Harley Quinn and Joker are being chased by Batman, that is probably one of my favorite scenes of DC Comics, where it really felt like, you know, I was immersed in the world of DC Comics. Then you have a project like Wonder Woman that is considered probably one of the best superhero movies of all time, a female-led project that had a budget of around $149 million with a worldwide box office of $824 million. Like, that is a huge profit right there, and people have to understand, people really have to understand about DC Comics and DC Comics fans. As a homosexual DC Comics fan, I love female-led superhero projects, and like even the straight ones, they love them too. Like pretty much everyone was rallying behind projects like the Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman. But the thing with superhero movies is the plot has to be really fucking good, and you have to get people in those seats in the theater. That a lot of times the trailers be turning people away from projects like Supergirl, like example Birds of Prey. I watched Birds of Prey I think twice in the theaters, because you know what, I'm a Harley Quinn stan. I went to see it because I love Harley Quinn. And do I think that movie is bad? I don't think it's that bad. I actually really enjoyed elements of it. I think the actors and the actresses were really great in that movie. It's just the problem is they picked the wrong storyline. They changed so much about the characters that they're trying to represent that it no longer felt like DC Comics. And I think that was part of the problem with that movie, that it was like Harley Quinn really felt like Harley Quinn, but it's just like everyone else in the cast was just playing a character that didn't represent anything remotely similar to the actual characters they're trying to portray. And we have to be honest that Birds of Prey was a financial failure, because unfortunately, even while trying to Google the information, it's like this shit is like buried. Like I can't even find the exact budget compared to all these other movies. It's saying between 80 to 100 million with a box office of 205 million. And if you know anything about that, that is not a good sign. $84 million was made between the United States and Canada in its entire run. In comparison to a movie like Superman that opened with $125 million, it's just like 1 week of Superman completely washed the entire run of Birds of Prey, and that's a problem. And I think that people need to understand that people don't have an issue with female-led projects. They have an issue with bad projects that don't represent the brand that they love so much, and that's the problem with a project like Birds of Prey. Most of the characters' designs and outfits don't even remotely look like the characters within the comics. Huntress isn't even wearing her signature headpiece. It's like it really got to the point where it's just like, these are characters that I think are cool, like well written. I saw this movie twice. There are honestly really bad scenes in that movie that I wish they cut. And it's just like, it gets to the point where it's like, wow, they really made something, but it's not the something that people wanted to see. If this was a different Harley Quinn movie that took place in Gotham, had maybe Poison Ivy and Catwoman literally just doing whatever, maybe had actual Joker in it, had scenes with the Joker. I think a lot of important scenes, even post breakup of Harley Quinn, is her struggles with the Joker. And they definitely address that in the movie, and her finding her own in this world, that she no longer has the protection of Joker's gang. But at the same time, it's just like they had to have like fill-ins for the Joker for his scenes only showing the back of his head because they couldn't get Jared Leto, or they didn't want Jared Leto. Most likely that. But at the same time, it just gets to a point where it's like people want to see Harley x Joker a lot. I think that, like, I watched the Harley Quinn animated series and I love that series, but it really went downhill at a certain point where it just stopped feeling like, you know, it stopped feeling like Gotham. It stopped feeling like the original characters. And I felt like that series itself really was reminiscent of the Batman animated series. I will always love the Batman animated series. I really love the first few seasons of Harley Quinn show, but it's just like people want to see these characters portrayed in a specific light. the Suicide Squad movie, the first one, really portrayed Harley Quinn really well. And then the second one, I felt like Harley Quinn didn't have an important role there. Like, it felt like that she was written in just to be there, and her plot line didn't really feel that impactful. And honestly, I really loved the second Suicide Squad movie. The issue obviously is that this came out during the pandemic, that, you know, people weren't going to the movie theater, so it's not fair to really judge that box office had that come out in a better time period. But people already kind of felt burned by the brand of the Suicide Squad, because there were so many scenes of the Joker and Harley Quinn that were shown in the trailers that eventually got cut. And even David Ayer has been, you know, screaming on social media like, hey, I have a cut of this movie that's so much better than what the studio put out, because the studio did not allow me to put my vision out. And those kind of cases are really unfortunate, because I watched the Snyder Cut. That is a great movie. I actually like the Snyder Cut, but the original Justice League movie, I fell asleep in the theaters because I was like, what the fuck is this shit? It's just like, it really just felt like, you know, a little bit like choppy. Like, and again, these movies are supposed to be fun, they're supposed to be dramatic, they're supposed to be camp, they're supposed to be humor, but not too much to the point where the whole plot is a complete joke. I think that's one thing about that I really like about DC Comics, is that they tend to tell some of the most serious, like, interconnected storylines where it's like, you know, the plot hits really fucking hard because of, it's like gods among men fighting in this world, that you can tell so much more dynamic and interesting plot lines that, you know, I feel like modern comic book movies have not been able to capture. That most of these modern comic book movies just treat everything like a joke. And this has been a big thing since, I think, Endgame. Pretty much no one has been able to capture that same kind of magic. That projects like Endgame showed the highest of stakes, characters like Black Widow dying. And then another thing, I wanted to see the Black Widow movie, but it was obvious, you know, Black Widow, you know, the actress was literally suing Disney over the treatment of that movie. And I just know that there's an unfortunate reality that it's like, that's not the Black Widow movie that we wanted to see, but it would have been cool to see a Black Widow movie in the theaters. But again, this was during the pandemic that I felt like that movie had unfair treatment, that movie had really bad VFX in comparison to the movies that just came out, aka Endgame. Like, post Endgame, Black Widow movie was about to be the most iconic thing in the world, and it really just ended up being a dud because of how the production and how the studio handled that project and the characters rather than how it should have been handled. And here we are today with the Superman James Gunn movie coming out in the James Gunn DC universe. And honestly, unfortunately, it is a little bit in hot water, especially with the Warner Brothers merger happening right now. DC might be going under in a different way than we anticipate. DC Comics isn't going anywhere. DC Comics is such a name brand, such a big market. Like, DC Comics makes so much money off of just selling t-shirts and shit like that, like merchandise, that they don't really even need to have a successful movie to keep going. But the unfortunate reality is that the James Gunn universe isn't panning out to fans how they want, because, you know, we started out with the Superman movie, which made money but didn't necessarily swing the doors off of the project. Like, it really didn't break records. It didn't kind of set the tone for the next projects coming out. And I think, unfortunately, the planning behind this DC universe was a little bit poor, because to follow up Superman with Supergirl was such a huge risk. Because again, if that Superman project even slightly underperformed expectations, now Supergirl is unlikely to ever hit the same benchmark that Superman hit, because again, Supergirl is a more niche character, whether we want to admit it or not. That it's like, I know a couple Supergirl storylines. The main one I know, and the famous one, is where, you know, she becomes like the daughter of Darkseid, where she works under Darkseid, and that's one of my favorite storylines of Supergirl, because it shows the dynamics of her, you know, how she has a very different impression on humanity and Earth than Clark Kent, because she lived the lifetime in Krypton, that she actually saw, you know, the destruction of her own world, and feels like an outsider compared to Clark Kent, who grew up with society, who grew up with, you know, his parents, and really ended up making his own within the human world, while Supergirl is thrown into a world that she doesn't understand. It's almost like the Starfire effect. You know, Supergirl can actually speak English well, but, you know, she doesn't have the same understanding of human culture and human society in the same way that Superman does. And according to James Gunn, they are adopting a rather recent iteration comic of Supergirl, a comic that I haven't personally read. I've seen pictures of it posted online because of the, you know, the project coming out, and I think it's a very, very vibrant, colorful, you know, project. I really like the art of it, but I haven't personally read it. So it honestly is like, I have no really frame of reference for this movie or the plot, which is not always a bad thing. I think that if you take an obscure plot line and really bring it to the masses is a great and powerful thing. But at the same time, for someone like me who actually really like dives into the lore of DC Comics, I don't really know this particular plot. And from the trailers, you really can't even tell anything about the plot. The trailers are so short, and I think unfortunately, whether we want to admit it, those trailers are so short because of marketing budget that it costs money to put a long trailer on YouTube. I have seen maybe 3 trailers for Supergirl. The first one was about 3 seconds where she just spun in the air and then the trailer instantly ended. Another one where she just kicked people and shot laser for 5 seconds and then the trailer ended. Like, it really seems like there's a very tight marketing budget, because again, these are the only 3 trailers I've seen in advertisements, and they were between 3 to 5 seconds, as in they did not want to pay for a full 10-15 second trailer. And before someone comes at me, I know what I'm talking about, because if you think about how Super Bowl trailers work, you're paying per time for how long you're trying to take up. And so when it comes to YouTube like advertisements where it's popping up before your video, you really are paying to get that project up there, to have your project play before a video. So that's why I'm saying is that to have a little short snippet play before a video is actually a lot cheaper than having a 30-second skip ad or like a minute long trailer playing before a video that actually does have a weighted value. If you know anything about marketing and advertisements, that the time of that trailer actually does play a big role in the cost of how much it costs to actually promote it and put it out there to be playing on like TV ads or to be playing on a YouTube video, because again, those are fragments of time that you're really fighting for within an entire ecosystem of ads, that a shorter ad is easier to throw on there and costs a lot less money to advertise. And because I'm a big DC Comics fan, I am more likely to see this movie even if I don't like the ad campaign. Like, I felt like the ad campaign for Birds of Prey, it really kind of told the story without even seeing the movie, that again, Harley Quinn's never in her iconic colors, that none of the characters' outfits are actually matching anything remotely to the designs. The characters aren't acting like the characters in the comics. So it really just kind of felt like, you know, at the end of the day, you can tell a lot from a trailer and whether or not you're going to like a movie. And that's not always the case, especially with this, where it's like they're only showing super small snippets of the movie. I can't get anything from the plot of what's actually going to happen in this project. And I think that they're kind of leaning into that is you have to really see the movie to even understand what Supergirl's actually going through. And I think part of the problem with the trailers is that it's very reminiscent of The Flash. And, you know, according to recent reports, that this movie is likely to open similar to the box office failure that was The Flash. And the reason why I say the trailer reminds me of The Flash, all the fight sequences are like in this super yellow backdrop, muddy, cloudy area with a just plain like dirt ground. Like, there's not really a lot of scene setup in those action fight sequences, and it reminds me a lot of the main fight with the Flash, where it's just like it really felt like there was nothing going on in the scene to kind of enhance the visuals, that it felt very muddy and muted, that the colors were very much so muted in every single shot of Supergirl, and when you watch The Flash, that's how it is. But again, the comic that they're trying to represent is extremely colorful. They use a lot of red tones within the skies. Now, that could be something that's represented in the movie, but we don't know that because we only have the basis of the trailers to go off of whether or not we want to see this movie. And someone like me, again, a DC Comics fan, I'm more likely to see it, but is a normie going to see it after seeing those 5-second trailers, after seeing the trailers that they have put out a very, you know, sparse marketing campaign likely to save on budget. It's like, what is gonna get normal people who aren't super obsessed with DC Comics like me to get in those theaters? And I think that's the big concern. And people have to understand about DC Comics, it is a 4-quadrant brand. Men and women love DC Comics, and I think that there's an unfortunate reality within comic book films and the comic book industry that when a project that is female led starts to get criticism, it goes straight to the concept of, oh, this is just misogynistic. Oh, these are just people hating this project because it is led by a woman. I'm somebody who wants to see the Supergirl project succeed. I want to see projects succeed within DC Comics because I don't want it to be another huge gap of lack of movies from DC Comics, because again, these are movies that I would always see. Every single DC comic movie I go to see, and it's just like, wow, I really feel like they are alienating people by trying to spread this kind of concept that it's like, just because it's a movie that people don't want and is led by a female superhero or a supervillain, that it's like all of a sudden it is because of hating men. And then you look at the statistics of those projects that come out like Birds of Prey, it's like still the majority of it are men. Men are going to see these movies still. It's just like less of them are going to see that movie. And people don't realize that like men and women go together to see these projects. A lot of time a guy and his girlfriend are going to see these projects because they're both huge DC Comics fans. And that's the power of DC Comics, that it hits every single market. Everybody loves DC Comics. And obviously not everyone. Some people are big Marvel fans more. I'm always going to say I prefer DC Comics over Marvel. Does that mean I don't like Marvel? No, I love Marvel just as much too, but it's like I am a DC Comics guy. So it's like, it's very disheartening to constantly hear this kind of trope where it's just like, no, people can have complaints about a female-led project. And I think there's a very unfortunate reality that the artists, the creators behind these projects really get it twisted, and that it very is unfortunate because it's like the actress of Supergirl is like probably seeing all this hate online. It's like, man, I look like Supergirl. I feel like I did a great job in that project. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into that project, and now the internet's on fire over, my representation. This doesn't seem fair. And that's why it's like, I want to make it clear that I do feel really bad for the actress who's going through this right now, because it's like the success of this movie is really riding on, her performance in the overall production. But if the project was not something like was it set up from the start to not be a project that the mainstream wants to see, that's going to reflect bad on her rather than the creatives that had to hand in those pieces. And if you make a project and it doesn't do well, you're always going to want to protect your baby. You're like, I worked my ass off on that project. And that's why I really do hope that people, cut the actress a little bit of slack. That I think that she's coming out and saying some statements that people are getting really angry about, like the Christian dad thing. I'm a Christian gay man, and I just like, I don't think that's the end of the world. And I think it's like, she might be alienating people with that though. And I think that is something to address, that it's like when you're in the media, when you say things, unfortunately, it does reflect on your character. Like, I'm not tripping over that because I just know that was a joke, but some people really take their religion seriously. And especially as a father, I think that some people, like Christian dads, might actually get offended by that. I'm not a Christian dad. I'm a Christian. I'm a homosexual Christian. But it's like, I'm not tripping because I know that it's like, I got better things to worry about. So honestly, I really just want to see, what this project actually has to entail, because it's like, I'm not going to sit here and cry over statements that this actress is making. At the end of the day, I only found this statement because of, headlines on Twitter. So it's really just about like, really, what are you trying to get angry about? And there are people who, rightfully they felt offended by this. I did not feel offended by this because, again, it's just like, I can still watch the movie and enjoy art. I can separate the artist from the art. But the question is this a movie that really needed a $175 million budget? And again, we already talked about other projects that had a similar budget to that. A project like Wonder Woman that had less of a budget but made more than Superman. So you really got to think about these things when it comes to a project like this. As just as much as it is a creative endeavor, you also are trying to, build a brand, build a project that, has multiple iterations. This is a series. We got Superman, we got the Supergirl movie, we got this random Clayface movie, which again, I just think that the lineup was not right. I just think that the biggest problem with DC Comics is they chose the wrong projects to invest in right off the bat. Like the Superman project, I think that was a good choice. They introduced a lot of different characters like Hawkgirl. They introduced the Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific. You know, we got a whole cast leading up to a Justice League project, but I think that, you know, a Supergirl project also needed a really big ensemble cast to kind of balance out the fact that Supergirl doesn't necessarily have the same star power. I think that that's one of the things the first Suicide Squad movie did well, that like Harley Quinn in isolation can be annoying and jarring, and that the thing about Harley Quinn is that she really gets balanced out by the characters around her, that she's usually always working in a team, because by herself Harley Quinn doesn't have a lot of power. That a lot of her power comes from, you know, her connections and her, you know, her really status within the supervillain world. And the other character they're really promoting in this movie is Lobo. In the trailer, we saw about like 3 frames of Lobo, and he looks good. He looks good. I like the design of Lobo. They picked the perfect actor for Lobo. But again, it's just like, if this is going to be the Lobo representation and then this movie doesn't do well, then it really just feels like, damn, we just lost our shot at Lobo being a huge star within the DC Comics movie universe. That it's like, unfortunately, if this movie underperforms, this is going to really negatively impact DC Comics, because it's like, this is the second project in the series. They're having another Superman project, and again, the Clayface project, we don't know if there's a superhero counteracting that Clayface. It feels like another Joker like kind of movie, but I think that the thing about the Joker movie is that the Joker is way more popular than Clayface. That I actually think Clayface is a great villain for a movie because of the idea of his acting and his ability to be anyone, almost like Mystique. Like Mystique is such a cool villain in almost all the X-Men movies, whether or not she's like interpreted correctly, we should say. I think that every single time Mystique is in an X-Men movie, I'm like, my jaw drops to the floor just seeing her in every scene. Like, it's so, like, she's so iconic in those movies that it's like, you know, Clayface could have had the same energy, but has that kind of monstrosity, kind of like, he could turn into this giant clay abomination, be making like weapons out of his arms. Like, he has such a cool, like, super villain kind of team up fight that it'd be like you would need a whole squad to take him down. Like, I think a lot of iterations, I think in like Young Justice, we saw kind of like the young Robins and a Cassandra Cain kind of like fighting the Clayface together, because it's like you cannot fight Clayface by yourself unless you have like insanely great powers. Like, I think like Superman's frost breath is commonly used as a way to take down Clayface. That is like, there are certain superheroes that match up better into different people, but it's like you don't always have Superman around to fight Clayface. That there are other, that, you know, the Gotham heroes also have to deal with this and you know, strategically plan and coordinated attacks to take out Clayface. So it's just like, if this Clayface movie isn't the movie to show, you know, the Gotham characters like Robin, Cassandra Cain, Batgirl, and all these other characters, Red Hood, then it's like, this just feels like a project that's disconnected from the rest of the universe. So it's honestly disappointing to see how the rollout of James Gunn's universe is happening. We got the Superman movie, which was, again, a bit of a mixed bag for people. My husband really liked the movie when he saw it in theaters, so it's obvious that they're still capturing DC Comics fans. We know that like James Gunn is a very talented director, and he is a great visionary, but at the same time, you know, when it comes to the money side of things, did he pick the wrong projects? And I think that that is something we really need to look at, because I think had Supergirl not just followed up the Superman movie, that movie probably would perform better. That I felt like we needed something in between that is a little bit more left field than a constant continuation of this Superman storyline. And I completely understand that. I think what they was going for, again, was like a complete Superman saga, because I feel like Superman has been underrepresented within, you know, DC Comics media, that a lot of the focus is always on Batman. That I think that it's a great idea to have Superman play a much bigger role in this kind of universe, that the story centers around him. But I also think that at the end of the day, it's probably not enough to carry this to financial success. That having Superman, which was a bit of a mixed bag, that did make a profit, but again had mixed reviews, and then go into a project like Supergirl, which is already, projecting to land around the same place that the Flash and the Marvels did. It's just like very, again, disappointing. And to see, again, the Marvels is a big project that people dunked on for so long. I didn't watch the first the Marvels movie, or I don't even know what it's called, Captain Marvel, because again, I don't know that character at all, like at all. Why would I see a movie that I have no interest in, like in that character, that I don't even watch every single Marvel movie? I didn't see like the there was like this movie where it's like Captain America and like the two sides were fighting. I think it's called like Civil War or something like that. I didn't see that one, and I've seen like all the other Captain America movies. But again, like that's the thing about capturing an audience. The Marvels movies didn't capture me because I didn't know those characters, and these trailers did not entice me enough to actually see that movie. And if you look at the Marvels and that box office failure, you will see that a majority men went to that project, just like every other comic book movie. But if you look at the successful comic book movies, it gets closer to a 50-50 margin, that it's like a project like the Marvels, men and women didn't show up for that project. You can't say that it's only men that sabotaged that movie when a majority men showed up for that project. And that's what really doesn't make sense to anybody. That it's like, you can't sit here and say that the men are sabotaging all the female-led projects when you got projects like Wonder Woman, the Suicide Squad movie, Suicide Squad, and then it's like, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, those movies massively popular with men and women. And then you see the projects like the Marvels, it's like nobody wanted that project. And it's like, you see the actresses of those projects, it's like, I feel bad for them too, because a lot of times they don't really understand this. They don't understand why people are hating on it. It does feel like it's just men throwing fire on them, but it's just like the female fans are less vocal like that. They just don't show up in silence, and y'all see that in the numbers. So we go back to Supergirl, where it's like, the actress is throwing shade at the men and the Christian dads. It's just like, y'all have to understand that even the women don't want to see these movies either. And it's like, I, as a DC Comics fan, want to see this project succeed. I don't want these creatives to be hurt by the fact that their project underperforms, because the issues are more complex and bigger than just their portrayal. That it's like, she could have gave the best portrayal of Supergirl of all time, and it's like, if no one went to see it, then it's like, it looks bad on her, despite the fact that she gave her all. And that's why I'm saying, like, as an artist myself, it's like, I do hope that people, don't take this anger out on the actress or the creatives involved, that it's like a much bigger problem within production, that it's like the storyline that they picked, the characters they chose to represent, and the whole plot as a whole is just not gathering people. The marketing campaign is not doing enough to bring people in seats when people are already iffy after a mixed bag like Superman. And there may be more cameos within this project that represent characters that show a much bigger range of the DC Comics universe, but we don't know that from the trailer, so it's really just going in blind and hoping that it's good, that not everyone's willing to take that risk during a recession, during an economic crisis that we're in post-pandemic. It's like, we have to understand that the value of the dollar is changing, that it's like people aren't going to movie theaters because they can sit at home and just wait till it comes out on Netflix, or wait till it comes out on HBO Max in a lot of cases with these movies. I know that Superman, relatively came out to, I think, HBO Max soon after it was taken out of theaters. So it's just like, why spend the money in theaters when it's just going to come out anyways, and it's a project that is not necessarily something that you're super hyped to watch anyways. And on top of that, we got people like Lobo in the project, who it's like, people want to see Lobo succeed. It's just like, it's just all too confusing, that it's like, dang, why couldn't this be, a different storyline? Why couldn't this be represented in a different way within the trailers that would actually bring up a bit more hype? Because again, I think the feelings toward this movie is lukewarm, and that's somebody who is actually like Supergirl like me. And I want to say this again, on the business side, there's a Green Lantern TV show coming out. I think that was a really bad idea, and I'll tell y'all why. Because it's just like, for a TV show like that, where they don't necessarily get the same box office returns, that it's just like, it goes up on HBO Max and they just cheer because it hits 1 million streams. Like, I think that there is a sense of like, what is actually, beneficial for a streaming platform is very subjective. That is very subjective, that people have, different perspectives on what they would actually buy a streaming service for. And it's like, is Green Lantern the show that actually is getting people to mass sign up for something like HBO Max? I don't know. And I also don't think that it is the case. But at the same time, I feel like there's a problem with a project like Green Lanterns, that with a budget of a superhero show versus a full movie, is that it's like they are sitting here having to spare their superpowers for specific scenes because, again, it costs a lot of money to do that animation VFX work. So, within budget, within the production, they are completely self-aware that it's like they're going to try to use the powers as least as possible to try to fit the whatever the budget or scope of that project is. And it's like, imagine if the Supergirl project was just Supergirl X Green Lantern X Lobo. Like, instead of having this Green Lantern superhero show, it's like it would have made so much sense for Supergirl, to go off world, because again, maybe it's something related to her not being able to find her place on Earth, and then she gets into a lot of trouble and she starts to meet the Green Lanterns, finds different like lanterns within the world. And again, we don't know, maybe Green Lantern shows up in this project. It is a off-world project. A lot of the Justice League off-world projects are almost always like a team project, because again, it's like it is very risky to go off-world as a superhero by yourself. There's just so much chaos and a lot bigger power scaling than what's on Earth, that is often a thing that a whole team like the Justice League, or sometimes Young Justice or Teen Titans, they go together in a unit. So it's like it would have been cool to see almost like a Supergirl X Green Lanterns X Lobo. I feel like that could have really ramped up the excitement for this project, because then you could be showing off the Green Lantern powers to the full extent with that 175 million budget, instead of having them in a TV show where we don't necessarily know the extent of how they're using their powers, whether or not that project is even a margin of success. Because again, I think that the streaming auxiliary market for a TV show just works completely different in modern times compared to back in the day, where TV shows were making bank, because it's like people would buy the physical CDs just to watch the seasons. That is a lot harder to access it compared to just clicking a single button and just clicking play. That it's like, is this really going to be beneficial for HBO Max in the long term? That is a very relative and subjective term. Is this going to be selling more Green Lantern toys? Probably, but it's like we really don't know. And I think that that's what I'm saying, is that like as a creative, as a production, a Superman movie and then a Supergirl project following it right after, as the breaking point of whether or not the rest of the DC universe is going to continue under James Gunn's reign. It really is just like we don't know. And unfortunately, because of Supergirl's projections being so low currently, it is really showing red flags that James Gunn might not even be in charge of DC Comics for very long. And on the other hand, we got the animation side of DC Comics. When has a good animated project from DC Comics came out? Because it's been so long. It's been years. It feels like after the Zack Snyder era, where they ended that animated series of movies. I don't know if y'all remember it. It was like the Apocalypse one, where like everyone was fucking dying. It was huge stakes. Like the whole crew was there. People was dying left and right, and they have to stop Darkseid. And it was like that was the end of that entire saga of animated movies. Like that saga wasn't perfect. I didn't necessarily like the interpretation of Raven in that, because it's just like they keep making Raven a child and a pussy, as if like the original interpretations of Raven was that she was like a full-grown adult at the time. She sought out Robin because the Justice League turned her away because Zatanna had detected evil energies and spirits from her, because she is quite literally almost like the incarnation of like the daughter of Satan, pretty much, like within that universe, because she is the daughter of Trigon, which is such a big, important part of her character, that it's like in modern iterations of Raven, instead of being this super badass empath healer, dark magic user, she's like, oh, I faint if I use my powers once. Like it really felt like the Jean Grey downgrade, where it's like Jean Grey is such a badass character in so many different iterations, but like whenever they try to portray her, it's just like she's a pussy that just faints after using her powers once. And that's what they did to Raven. I'm like, no, we're not gonna do that. Like, and that's why I really like Injustice Raven. People hated that iteration of her, but I thought it's really cool that it's like, instead of her being like this, like, monotone character. They took a little bit more demonic turn with her. Like, I think that, like, compared to the Teen Titans TV show, they made her, like, they really showed how, you know, how much Trigon has influenced her and her, you know, in her power, and that even when she's a superhero, it shows in her voice and her inflection that she is a dark magic user, that she is a witch. So I really just, like, honestly miss this huge era of, you know, DC animation. And it's just like, we really haven't seen that. There was a project under James Gunn, but again, those are characters I don't really know, and I didn't watch it because, again, I feel like it's just like, it looked a little bit cheap, and it just didn't feel like it lived up to the expectations of, like, you know, how they was using modern DC comic characters, and, you know, characters that are, you know, really represented as, you know, the mainstream ones. That it's like, nowadays it's like, when was the last time we actually got a bunch of really badass mainstream superheroes from DC Comics fighting together? Because it's like, it sometimes feels like DC Comics doesn't even let DC Comics use its characters. Like, it really has gotten to that point where it's like, they have to have, you know, I think even in that James Gunn movie, they had like a shadow of Batman. It's like, the Batman reveal for the universe in this animated series, we didn't draw his design because it's not ready yet, or it's like, we don't want to spoil it. And it's just like, it just gets to the point where it's like, come on, y'all, like, we gotta be realistic. That it's like, we can't even show Batman. Like, we can't even, James Gunn isn't allowed to use Batman in his movies, or is it just a choice that he's not using Batman? Like, it really just gets to that point where it does feel like DC Comics is sabotaging itself because they aren't even allowed to use the characters that they want to use. And I think that's very unfortunate, because, again, the thing, like, with a solo Clayface movie, we don't know if there's going to be a superhero fighting him, but it's like, that is a great idea. Why don't we have superheroes fighting Clayface? And it's like, the same way that's like, I think the Joker worked as an Elseworld story, the Joker movie, because, again, there was no opposition, that this Joker was way too old for the Bruce Wayne of that era, that this was clearly a side universe. But it's like, if we're making a connected universe project, and it's like, this Clayface movie is the third one in the lineup, and we're not seeing any superheroes in the trailers, we're just seeing, you know, like, oh, we're in Gotham, you know, I don't even know if it takes place in Gotham. But again, it's just like, it feels so confusing for me as a DC Comics fan, that it's like, it just feels like they aren't allowed to use the characters they want to use. And if they are, and they're just picking these projects, and I think they really chose the wrong projects to represent their brand. Then you got the Matt Reeves Batman movies, where it's like, there's coming up with a second one. It's taking forever to come out, but it's a connected universe, that it's a separate universe from the James Gunn universe. The first one was a financial success, and I'll tell you my honest opinions about that Batman movie. I really look at the Batman animated series as the gold standard. You know, Batman is a comedic character. He always has these one-liners. He's always on top of his shit. He's always 10 steps ahead of his enemies. And that's the really cool thing about Batman, is that he really has a large range of emotions, that he has, you know, this billionaire playboy kind of, you know, persona when he's in the business meetings, when he's out in public, that he is a famous person outside of his own endeavors. And so that's why I'm saying, is that it's like, honestly, like, my issue with the Matt Reeves Batman is that it really lacks the charisma that Batman shows outside of being Batman, that it was a little bit too monotone. I felt like focused on the depression too much. That I understand that Batman is a very depressed, troubled character, that he struggles a lot with his, you know, upbringing of his parents being killed. But I think that my biggest issue with that movie is that it couldn't balance the brooding Batman with the persona of Bruce Wayne. That I think that that's the biggest problem that it lacked compared to the Dark Knight series, where it's like, you could see the billionaire persona, the kind of like charismatic Batman outside of the suit. But it's like, with the problem with Robert Pattinson's interpretation is that it felt like that he was just the brooding Batman throughout every scene, no matter what. And I think that was my biggest issue. But I think that the Catwoman in that movie, she absolutely killed that. Like, she was my favorite part of that movie, and I do think that is actually a good Batman movie. I will say this here, that I actually really liked that movie. I didn't finish it. I think I'm sorry, like, I actually didn't finish finish it, but I like the movie, what I saw, because I'm going to finish it one day. But I think that there is a sense that it's just like, I did feel a little bit, disheartened to see that. Like, I want to see that in the second one, that it's a bit more, dramatized, that it's a bit more, charismatic and camp in that kind of way, that he does have a persona outside of Batman. And even if it's fake, his happiness and charisma, that's a very key part of Batman, that he has to go into these business meetings, these luxury dinners and all this stuff, play the billionaire playboy as if he doesn't have to go home, put on a bat suit and get his like shit beaten out of in combat. Like, it's really just like, that's how it is. And I think that that's my big issue with that movie and the portrayal of Batman within that series. But again, we got two different DC comic universes going on right now. James Gunn is like, I don't know if he's even allowed to use Batman because there's a different Batman going on right now. So it really just has become a confusing clusterfuck that honestly the mainstream media can barely keep up with, that I'm sitting here like, I am one of the biggest DC Comics fans since I was a kid. It was one of my favorite brands, one of my favorite characters and universes, that I love the fact that they can kind of take different interpretations. It's like, just because Matt Reeves' Batman is way more depressed than the ones that I'm used to doesn't mean that it's not a good interpretation. And I think that's the power of being able to take these characters and put them in different lights and different situations. But I think that the problem is that it has to be an overall good project, that people have to actually want to take the time to listen and watch that project. So honestly, that's just wrapping up my opinions on DC Comics and the big problems with what's happening now with Supergirl and the future of James Gunn's DC Comics. So I'm Drizzleboy, Detective Drizzleboy. Y'all take care. Peace.